Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Son of a Blitch podcast. I'm your host, George Blitch. I'm here today with my co-host, Matthew Mitchell, and we are joined by a special guest, Larry White, the founder of Wild Game Gourmet, which can be found at thewildgamegourmet.com. And today marks the first interview in our series of wild game preparation and cooking. Thanks for joining us, Larry. And I'd like to start with you introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about your journey and timeline becoming a chef.
Oh yeah, name's Larry White. Live in a low country of South Carolina. Been cooking professionally since about 2003. Started off with the Coast Guard, went to culinary school with them. Towards the end of my Coast Guard career, started kind of wanting some extra education. So I took classes on the side downtown Charleston, South Carolina. Did some personal chef catering on the side to, try to get myself into the commercial aspect of things. And then got out of that, got into fine dining, went back to culinary school again, got my bachelors, and then just kind of bounced all over the place. Did fine dining, owned a food truck, owned a restaurant. And just kind of went from there.
So tell me about what your Wild Game Gourmet project is now. I know you got the website. I've seen a lot of your posts on Instagram. What are you working with in that, and what's the kind of goal behind it?
Originally just educational. I mean, it started off, I sold my food truck, got out of the restaurant industry. My wife was pregnant. And, I quickly learned, I was like, man, I can't be away from my family that much. So it started off as like a creative outlet because I love being outdoors, love to hunt. And so really it's, it's a creative outlet, and then I want to educate people. And I really enjoy it. But my main goal is definitely education, and then just try to give some people ideas of different things they can do with wild game.
That's awesome.
I'm curious, early on, when you first started with the Coast Guard, did they put you into just being a cook, or was that something that you asked for? And I know that previously listening to you answer questions about what was your influences, I think your grandmother was a strong influence. So did you gravitate right to being a cook in the Coast Guard based on your own influences with the Coast Guard, or was that just serendipity that they did that?
No, I signed up for it. I was taking business classes in Wilmington, North Carolina, and then just kind of got burnt out. And I mean, I knew I was kind of an entrepreneur at heart, and I was like, business classes are cool. I don't really think it's going to help me out. And I was like, I'm just going to figure something else out. And then ended up, my neighbor was in the Coast Guard. So I looked into that, and then looked into the culinary program and saw, they actually had a school out in California. They offered a nice bonus. So
nice.
Kind of jumped in there.
Where in California was that located?
Petaluma.
Okay. Right on, man. So one thing I was kind of curious about is what you're primarily hunting and fishing for in your region of South Carolina there. And also what's in your freezer right now?
Primarily hunting for wild pigs and deer, turkey and geese. My property is flooded with wild pigs. So, every winter, you can hunt them year round, but I try not to mess with them during deer season. So every winter I try to, fill the freezer with as many as I can. Yeah.
Have you found your way to any of I know there's black bear in the region too, right?
There's a low count here, like really low count.
But north of you.
Yeah, one county over, you can hunt them, but there's like a 30 animal quota. So you can get a tag, but as soon as they hit 30, they shut it off.
Okay. I've got some buddies in North Carolina who I know on the eastern side of the state, they're hunting in the marshlands for the black bear, and not sure how far south that their range is.
Yeah, they've got quite a bit more than we do. Yeah, they got some big bears out there compared to here.
So mentioning hogs, I know you probably got some hogs in your freezer and some venison. Is there anything else you kind of got there right now, and stuff that you got planned to cook before the season begins again?
I usually fly through my, no pun intended, I usually fly through my turkey and geese pretty quick, because that's, to me, is kind of special. I'm not a huge bird hunter. I love eating them. I love cooking them, but I'm just hunting. I'm all about like spot and stalk, being in the woods, just kind of, adventurous kind of hunter. So I don't shoot too many of those a year. So I kind of like eat those first.
Right.
And right now I've probably got maybe like 20 pounds of pork and like 50 pounds of venison left. I'm kind of running on E.
Good thing the season's coming up here soon.
Oh yeah. Well, mine's where we start early here. We've been in since August 11th, I think.
Okay. Oh, really?
Yeah, it's super early. We have a long season, a lot of tags.
So what is your kind of about how many like deer, hogs, what are you kind of putting in annually in your freezer? What are you taking?
I would say probably if I can get at least 4 deer, that does me pretty well. But I would say ideally I would like to have like 8, because I eat a ton of meat and then also cook a lot, and then friends take it. But yeah, I mean, eight deer for me would satisfy me 100%. Hogs, I don't eat a lot of it. A lot of it goes into like charcuterie and everything. I would say, three pigs a year would do me, 100% fine. But I'm trying to start taking more off my property than giving those to friends.
Sure.
Something that we come across when we're thinking about the upcoming hunting season and whatever bounty that we may get, even though we're not chefs, I mean, we are into cooking. And so I'm thinking ahead about what kind of dishes could come off of the hog or the deer or whatever. Are you, as a chef, do you look ahead to, like when you're about to butcher, in that moment where it's field dressed and you're about to butcher, are you already thinking about dishes in your mind that you're sort of preparing for in the way that you butcher?
Yeah, yes. I mean, sometimes, but it's more work in the end, I guess. But I leave everything, as whole as possible. So I don't grind any meat or anything. So there's like, a whole shoulder, whole hind legs, and I cut the back straps like in half and leave them like that. So when I come up with an idea in my head, I've got everything I need in the freezer. Nothing's really messed with, and I can go, kind of go from there. So because I feel like once the meat's ground, it's ground. You can't go back and shoot it.
When you say in half, are you talking like you leave the back strap attached to the ribs like a saddle kind of cut?
Oh no, I just meant like I would just chop it in half, just wise, and then I could kind of go from there.
Got it.
But every once in a while I'll do the rib chops, but not a whole lot.
I mean, we try to do the same thing. We'll leave the quarters, and we butcher everything ourselves. There's not much going to the processor, and it's an interesting process if you're thinking ahead of time, like what you might want to do with the meat, and so our big hunting trips in December, and we're already having conversations about what recipes we're going to get into,
It's more so with me with pigs, just because I do a lot more like curing and sausages. So a lot more kind of, more ideas will pop in my head as I'm butchering with pigs more than deer. Yeah.
On the subject of charcuterie and pigs, do you have some kind of like humidifier type refrigerator that controls the humidity and the dry or whatever the temperature at home?
Yeah, so currently I have a full-size fridge. I used to use, when I was back in culinary school, I just used a smaller wine fridge because you could dial in the temperature above 40 degrees or 42, whatever it is. But now I just have a full-size fridge with I can't remember, I think it's like Ink Bird or something like that. It's a little gadget you screw on the side of your fridge, and you can plug in a humidifier, dehumidifier, and you can actually change the temperature of your refrigerator.
Solely dedicated to charcuterie.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, I've looked into the refrigeration units that you buy that are already set up for that, and it seems like sort of the do-it-yourself kits are a little bit more economical.
Oh yeah, and it's that. With as many gadgets they have out now, I mean, it's so easy compared to back in the day.
Totally. Well, tell us a little bit about where you're hunting. You kind of have your own back 40, right?
Yeah, my wife will probably kill me for for saying this, but yeah. So like I said, I'm kind of a roamer and like being out, so I don't hunt on my property that much. And I know it sounds crazy, but the way my property is designed, like if you don't hunt when the wind is 100% right, I mean, you're kind of screwed. So, so I mean, I'll hunt my own property. This still might be a lot to people, maybe 10 to 15 times for deer max. And then pigs, I don't really care once wintertime kicks in. And then I'll spend about 20-ish days on public land, something like that, hunting.
Cool.
Maybe.
And is that pretty close to where you are? Do you have to travel a little bit?
No, not for South Carolina. My property, which it's impenetrable, you can't get in there. But I'm basically backed up to a wildlife management area, and then the public land, for this area is pretty much all surrounding me. So I've got probably 200,000 acres within 45 minutes of me, just driving all around.
That's awesome.
We call that the back to 200,000.
Yeah. 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 Kind of a lucky find. I was trying to talk my wife into moving into the mountains, and I knew she didn't really want to. So I kind of started looking and found this little honey hole of a property the way it was set, kind of set at. So ended up working out perfect.
Does your family, your wife and kids, are they sampling all your dishes as well? Or is there some things they're like, I don't know if I'm going to try the venison heart pokey or something like that? Are they pretty much open game?
No, my wife actually, and this had nothing to do with me. It was on her own will. Like she went 110% quit eating farm raised meat, and she only eats fish and wild game. And that has nothing to do with me. She just, we've lived near farms, and she's kind of saw the whole process, and she's just not about it. My kids are selective. They'll eat any kind of like shredded braised meat, or if I, grind it up. But if there's any kind of weird stuff, they won't eat it. Back in the day they would, but not anymore.
I think Matt and I can be on that same page there with our kiddos. Certain things are like, I don't know, Dad. You're like, just try it. Don't look at it.
The little boy's getting better. My girl's, she's kind of sketched out with the guy, even though he doesn't, my little boy, as long as it's like doesn't look too gross, he's like, oh, I want to try a bite. Yeah.
That's cool.
I had my daughter try the heart about 3 years ago when she was 5 years old, and that was successful. But then she realized, okay, wait a minute, I'm eating the heart, like that's,
yeah.
I've never seen that at the grocery store, and so I think it's a similar experience where like they'll try things and then they get to an age where like they get real picky, and then hopefully they'll come back around,
Yeah, my little girl tried sushi and actually enjoyed it when she was like, it was like a California roll. It wasn't like real sushi, but right. When she was 2 and she would like gobble it down. Now she's like, no, I'm not going near it.
I think it's good to influence them early, and like it becomes normal, right? Like my kiddo knows I'm going to go hunt. I'm going to go and put animals in the freezer. She'll see me butchering them. And sometimes she's like, ew, I don't want to see that. But then once I'm done cooking it, she's like, oh, I'll give it a shot. And then like the other night we had Taco Tuesday, and we were saying, okay, we got some ground beef over here. We got some ground venison. And she's like, you know what I want? I'm like, yes, that's the venison.
I have to ask you about that, the heart poke bowl. Looks phenomenal. It really does look like tuna. But that dish, like how do you, I think I was reading on the post that you were just inspired by the heart was looking like tuna, and then and then you just sort of like, okay, let's try this out, let's put this together. Am I correct in that? That's just sort of like how a bunch of recipes come to you just in the moment. You're just sort of seeing something there.
Yeah, I've got to give credit where credit's due. That's 100% how it happened. But another idea that popped in my head that I had toyed with back in the day is Jesse Griffiths had done ceviche with heart, and I think that popped in my head. I was like, he's doing, and I was trying to think of other ways besides doing like a ground up tartare or something like that. And then that just kind of popped in my head. That with the color of tuna, I was like, oh, a tuna bar style heart would be awesome.
Well, we're definitely trying it this season. That's where I struggle personally, and George and I have talked about this is organ meat, the flank area, the ribs, just like that. That's still a territory that's a little difficult, and definitely going to come back around to your poke recipe there. It's beautiful, and it's with tuna, it's it's something that I'll seek out on a menu if I see it. So like I instantly gravitated to that in my head when I saw it on Instagram.
Yeah, I honestly got half of that bowl, and then my wife ate that, and then all the rest of the.
Nice. Yeah.
But I will say, on a heart recipe, I try to teach it or preach this to everybody. That venison heart ham, I've got it on my website. The picture's kind of horrible from my old camera, but that's probably the hands down the best heart dish outside of probably that poke that I've made. It's really good.
Noted.
Yes, we will be trying that out. We tried it 2 different ways last season. We did kind of like started out in a pan and just kind of did a light cook on that. And then the next time we got some coal fat and we put it over some mesquite, and we were kind of having some cigars, hanging out, and just kind of had it on there and weren't really monitoring the time or the temperature fully. We just kind of started turning it and, just chit chatting. And that one ended up cooking a little bit too much. And I found that there was a kind of I wouldn't necessarily say like a rubber band texture, but there was definitely that the more you cooked it, it seemed to be a little chewier. And that one that we just kind of had hit with the pan and just the outside is way chewy. And so when I was looking at like the picture of the poke bowl or the video that you did, it was like, oh, I think we're doing this wrong. I think we need to go maybe just straight raw here. And some people, they freak out about the idea of eating like raw backstrap or tenderloin and heart. And there's a couple cuts there that you can easily do raw.
Oh yeah. I still have people will message me like, that's raw, right? And I'm like, dude, it's fine.
It's fine. Yeah. Yes. On the heart, one question that I had for you was, obviously, I mean, you stated this, I think, in the post, but it looked like there was nothing but like just red, pure meat. None of the, I didn't see any of the extra tissue or some of that white fat. I guess it's the fat at the top of the heart that you tend to see. Can you talk a little bit about like how you go about prepping and cutting the heart, whether it's for the poke dish or any other dish?
I mean, for that one, for minimal loss, I like using like a really thin, almost like a fillet knife.
Mm-hmm.
Use a really thin paring knife just because I can have better control. And I'll just kind of like try to get as much as I can off, with like kind of paper razor thin slices to get that clean as you can. And then I'll kind of get that in kind of a uniform shape. And then I'll have that laying flat and then try to cut it again across, horizontally, and have 2 1/4-inch pieces, and then you can go back and dice. You could leave the whole thing whole and dice it, but I think the texture and the size and everything's going to come out better if you cut it in half again.
So you butterfly, get the valves out, kind of clean the inside, and then is there are you taking the outer layer off as well?
Yes, for this. Yeah.
For this. Okay.
Yep. So I'll butterfly, clean both sides, and it'll look like just like a super deep red steak or a tuna steak. And it shouldn't be for this particular dish, there shouldn't be any like other kind of textures or strands or membranes on there.
Got it.
And in some of your other dishes that you're doing heart, you're leaving all that?
Yeah, I'll still clean the inside out, but the outside, like heart ham or any of that stuff, I'll leave that on there. I think I did take off the like the fat cap that's on there just so I could have some more smoke kind of penetrate the meat. But I don't think there's anything wrong. I mean, it doesn't give me any kind of off taste or anything.
Nice.
Yeah, the outside is this is more of a texture thing. Like when it cooks up in butter or oil and you're just trying to just get a light sear on it, you can tell there's a different texture on the outside.
Yeah, and which I know you've seen it, but there's like a super really thin, like small membrane that's almost thinner than the membrane you'll see on a liver.
Right.
But
yeah,
it doesn't get as tight as liver, kind of bouncing off your teeth.
Well, the only thing I've ever done with liver is pate. I haven't even seared it up yet. Just simply with like onions, like the old classic liver and onions. Is there, just like the heart ham you were mentioning before, do you have a recipe on your website that's a good go-to just for liver?
I'm trying to think. I've got just like a classic boudin. I think I've got kind of like a fancier spin on like a liver and onions sandwich. That's really good. It's seared. I want to say it's like caramelized onions with like vinegar or wine, and then I put tempura fried onions on top of that. Just kind of really good.
I think I remember seeing that actually. I think
it was a failure. It's from one of my favorite cookbooks from like the 30s, and this guy actually studded the liver with fat, and I think it would have worked out, but I would have had to have studded it with a lot more fat, and it was braised, and I cooked it for as long as he said, and then ended up trying to cook it longer, and it just the texture never changed. It was just too tough.
What cookbook is that you're speaking of?
So it's the Dairydale. It's a 2-part cookbook. It's the Dairydale Fish and Game Cookbook by Louis P. DeGoy, and he's a master chef from back in the day. He's got a ton of cookbooks out, but he's way ahead of his time. But yeah, I don't remember which one is the game, but you'll see it. It's a 2-part book. One will be game, one's fish.
Okay, cool. We'll check that out.
Yeah, that's something we were interested in asking you about. Is obviously you're probably staying away from wild game cookbooks, but in culinary school or just through the history of cooking, maybe even with your grandmother, are there cookbooks that you feel like are that would be good for hunters to have in their kitchen that have inspired you over the years that aren't necessarily associated with wild game?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on, what kind of, region or whatever country you get your influences from. But I would say number one for meat preparation is any of Francis Mallman's cookbooks. He's got Mallman on Fire and 7 Fires, and there's nothing really, I mean, there are some like a little bit fancier stuff in there, but most of it's straightforward, and it just teaches you how to cook a piece of meat the correct way, and then you can kind of elevate it from there. The Fish and Game Cookbook I just told you about, and then as far as kind of my region, there's the Foxfire Cookbook. It's an Appalachian cookery book. That one's really a really good one if you're into Southern food.
Cool. And we are.
And some of that Southern food is influenced by early some of the English style of cooking, and German style of cooking. I would imagine in that region.
A lot of it's West Africa.
Oh, really?
Yeah. A whole bunch of it. Yeah. So if you dive deep down that rabbit hole, I don't know if you knew who Sean Brock is. He kind of revived the whole culinary, Southern culinary movement, and like, field to table. I mean, he was like the guy that kind of redid everything. He had a restaurant here, and he recently moved to, we had a few restaurants here, and he moved to Nashville. But he's a genius with food anyway, but he's revived a lot of Southern ingredients. Like he sourced them, it started like a little small farm to make sure they didn't go extinct. I mean, he's a world of knowledge.
So we're talking like Southern vegetables like okra and things like that, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, there's definitely, and I know like where we are in Texas and Louisiana, obviously there's the Cajun and Creole influence here. Some of that is African, some of it's, Indian or Native American, I should say, and some of it's French, obviously. So like the barbecue in the region where you are, would that be that would be more European influence though, right?
I want to say ours is more German.
Got it.
Because the only reason why I say it could be either or, but the reason why I say that is because our sauce is the mustard sauce, mustard base, and then a lot of the roots that if you read about, they're pretty much saying that kind of was like a German concoction and kind of morphed into what it is today. But
there's a big German influence here in Texas as well, and like chicken fried steak seems to me a lot like schnitzel.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So the some of these cookbooks, especially early on from like we have a James Beard cookbook and we made deviled eggs out of it, and they were as salty as an oyster that just came out of the ocean, so you have to be careful a little bit, about some of these really old ones. But are you like on a contemporary level, are there any chefs that you look to and are inspired by at the moment?
Probably Ron McKinley out of yeah, he's kind of my style. He's like super kind of forward thinking, but he likes old school cooking. But some of these concoctions he comes up with meat, man, are mind blowing. If you look at his account, like it's just nuts. Different kind of charcuterie and the way he stuffs different meat with, like, fish mousse, and just, I mean, it's just cool. I mean, it looks kind of modern, but at the same time it's very old school.
That's cool, man. Are you, when you're out, well, I guess one question is, do you have your own garden? Are you foraging in your kind of back 200,000? Are you getting some influences on what's around you? And then also curious about, when you do go out to the stores, are you going and kind of checking out things that just, oh, that looks interesting, that might pair well with that? What's your kind of idea and how you're kind of accumulating your ingredients around your wild game dishes?
So I'm a big kind of Latin American food fan. So my garden, I'll do a lot of different chilies that are Latin American influence, and then I'll do some Asian chilies as well. But my garden is 100%, things that I can't get from the grocery store. So like, I just want to grow some unique items. And then when I go to the store, even if I try to tell myself to pre-plan and go there, like I just don't do it. Like I just like go in there and seeing what looks good and just loading up on it, and then come back here and then just kind of figuring things out.
What are some of those things that you're growing that you're talking about that you might not find normally in stores?
I think one of them was an Italian, I think it's rapagante or something like that, like a summer squash, but it gets pretty big. And most squash, the summer squash, they'll get big, they're almost inedible. Well, this one kind of cures and morphs into like a winter squash, I guess you could say. So the texture goes from a super juicy, like tender summer squash, then it gets really dense. You can kind of cook it for a long time, and even in puree it, and it would almost come out almost like a butternut squash or something.
Oh, nice.
Because you can leave it out there and forget about it, and then come back and you can do something else with it.
That's cool. What kind of stuff are you doing with that?
I made pickles out of it, like different kinds of succotash, and then I literally just had so much of it. I just did a huge, just a batch cook of the kind that kind of looks like the winter squash. So I made a huge, literally a crock pot full of that stuff. And then I like two options. I'll kind of keep it like that, eat it or re-season it, and then I'll take some and puree it, and you can make a soup out of it, make a sauce out of it, or whatever.
Nice.
And I would think that the squash would probably pair well with pig.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
definitely.
And so not only the squash, but anything else in your garden, is that ever a focus of your of your recipes or any of these dishes that you make, to try to keep it as away from the grocery store as possible? Obviously the meat, of course, is that way.
Yeah, I mean, I try to grow as much as I can. I have a problem of biting off more than I can chew. So, I mean, I'll plant a garden that's way too big. I'll end up losing some crop just because I kind of get too carried away. But yeah, I mean, I try to grow as much stuff as I can without getting carried away, and then focus my food around that. But there are my garden's not too, that big. So I do have to rely on the grocery store for certain things.
You mentioned too, your kind of Latin American influence, and from a previous conversation we had, you were telling me about, like, with your food truck that you ran, that was a very kind of focus on kind of that style of table fare and quick, So what kind of stuff were you cooking there? What was your focus for the most part when you were running that?
A little bit of everything, in all honesty. I like to create things. I literally change the menu. I mean, sometimes every day, sometimes, 3 or 4 times a week. But yeah, I mean, I did Peruvian food, Salvadorian, Mexican, Cuban, and it was street food focused. And then I would kind of, if I did a gig at a brewery and, they wanted something a little more contemporary, I would try to, come up with something that was, nobody's ever heard before. So I'd make like a Cuban style pork, but make like a rillette out of that. And then make like a mojo vinaigrette or something, just trying to make it, more modern than.
That's cool, man. And still, are you doing some catering? Is there some special, events or things where people are bringing you in to cook right now?
Yeah, I'll do some private chef, personal chef gigs. I don't really market it too heavy. I'm trying to focus more on this, but I'll do small parties. I mean, I try to limit it to like 12 to 15 people max. I don't really do full on catering anymore. I would, but yeah, that's about the extent that I'm doing right now.
And you mentioned earlier with your cookbooks that you kind of had some of the ones you recommended and stuff, but I know a lot of the things that you're creating, they are completely and 100% authentically your dishes, and that you've kind of tested and tried out over the years. Are we going to, at some point in time, see the Larry White Ultimate Wild Game Cookbook? Is this something that's in the works there?
Yeah, right now I've got one focused more on like deer and elk. It's got the potential to morph into a bigger book. It might, but yeah, I've already got the name picked out and the handle already picked out, all that stuff. So I just need to hunker down.
Take my money, sir.
Yes. Like, you got your first two pre-orders right now.
Yeah.
Gonna pull out our phone, Venmo you. That's awesome, man. I'm excited to see that build, and it takes time. I mean, I remember Jesse Griffiths was talking about the hog book that he came out, and I remember someone interviewed him and they're like, "Oh, how long did you work on it?" And he's like, 10 years. And it's like, I think that interview is like, what? And I ran a publishing company, and I know that usually a book takes about 2 years to put together at minimum. And there's a lot going on, especially with something where you're having to try out recipes, you're, taking pictures of them, taking notes, and kind of getting it exactly where you want. Cause once you publish that, especially if it's in like a print form or whatever too, it's like, you're not changing it. So you kind of want to have your best foot forward. So I'm sure that you've been kind of working on the craft of this for many years, getting it to, closer to completion, or as it may be.
Yeah. And I'm still learning. I mean, I don't want to give out really any details.
Right.
It'll be unique compared to other wild game cookbooks. And there's a lot more attention to detail than for me to create just a regular cookbook, I guess you could say. So it'll be a process. I won't be surprised if it took me, another 4 to 5 years.
We'll still put our pre-order in today. So we're ready. You just named the price.
Well, it's interesting to see your Instagram. I mean, you're already, I don't know, are you solely taking these pictures yourself of the food?
Yes.
Okay. Because I mean, they're beautifully plated, of course, because I would expect that from a chef. But I mean, the photography and just the video, like just taking us through like how you craft a dish. I mean, I would imagine that I hope that you have a lot of control over your cookbook, because it seems like you already have an eye for color and design and all the fun stuff that gets us and like normal cooks inspired by these cookbooks.
Yeah, I'm hoping. I know it'll be a lot of work, but I'm hoping I can do all the pictures and all that jazz. I've gotten offered. There's some companies out there that'll basically have the title picked out of the book and all this. I've gotten offered that, and it's just and it still takes a lot of work, but you don't really have that much control over it. And I've turned those down. To me, it's just not worth it. I'm going to put in all that time and effort out. Like you said, I want to be able to put my
your stamp on it.
That's right. Your ownership. That's fantastic to hear. And also, when looking at these different dishes, it's almost hard to find if there's a something that you're like a thread of inspiration, meaning like you do a lot of different things. Is there a certain cuisine or a certain part of the world that is piquing your interest at the moment in terms of like creating different dishes?
I mean, hands down, really my go-tos usually are Southern and Latin. Mm-hmm. I've kind of backed off that just a little bit. I've kind of like got my toes a little bit more in the Asian side of things. But that's, to me, Asian, I mean, a lot of different cuisines are hard to cook, but like there's Asian food can be very difficult to cook. Some of the ingredients are hard to get. And it's kind of like, it's one of those things, man, like they take it serious. And if you start putting out stuff like, oh, here's this dish, you know what I mean? And it's wrong. I mean, you just get annihilated, and it's almost kind of disrespectful. I mean, from what I've gathered. So it's kind of like, I'm trying to dip my toes into that, learn as much as I can and do it justice versus like just coming up with some random dish that has, soy sauce and just trying to throw stuff in there you think that goes in there.
Sure. One other question I kind of had in as far as your food preparation tools. Earlier you kind of mentioned a few different types of knives. What are some just kind of standard things that people who are starting to, hunt and they want to begin preparing their own wild game recipes, what are some of like the must-haves tools? And it could be like anything from like something that's like a little $5 thing to like maybe a $500 grinder. What are some things you're utilizing the most, and what do you suggest kind of people have on hand in their kitchen?
I would say to have full control, to do what you want to do is, and you don't have to have super expensive stuff unless you're, processing, 100 pounds of meat a year. Just, a good grinder that's not going to overheat. You have to look at the reviews just to make sure it's not going to get hot, because you want that stuff ice cold. Just a grinder, a stuffer, some pretty decent knives, a sharpening stone, some butcher's twine. I mean, those would get you way, ahead of most people. And most people sleep on a crock pot, but I'm telling you, like, a crock pot with wild game is a game changer, because once you take it out of the pot, you can still do more stuff to it, and it saves you time. Like if you want like a full meal, I would rather have a crock pot over a sous vide machine any day. I'd rather spend my money on a nice rice cooker. So that way you got your meat set, and then, done when you get home at work, then you can just throw some rice in the rice cooker, and then you've got a meal for, a week.
It's hard to beat a shank that's been cooking slow for 8 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. And I think you've mentioned this before in other podcasts. I think the neck is one of your favorite portions of the animal, correct?
Yeah, the neck is, and that's, I kind of poke fun at a sous vide machine, but that's my next project. Is I want to try to sous vide a boneless neck and have that still at like a medium temperature in the center with everything kind of broken down. I've seen that technique here back actually from the guy Sean Brock. He did it back in like 2006 with like a short rib, and I remember walking in there. I'm like, how is this short rib so tender and it's still red in the middle? Like, it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I think I'm going to try the sous vide neck and just see if I can get everything to kind of break down and still have like a perfect, like medium-ish, rare-ish meat in the middle.
That's awesome. There was a dish that Matt had cooked up recently, like a rouladin, where he laid out that kind of side, meat over the ribs. And well, tell us a little bit about that, Matt.
I mean, I have to give credit to, the chef who is, it's his recipe. 'Cause again, we're cooks, we're not chefs. So we're diving into recipes all the time. So Jesse Griffith's recipe was to lay the flank meat flat, onions, jalapeno, bacon, and mustard, and then you roll that up, sear it, slow cook it in a braise. And if I remember correctly, I think I used for that braise, I actually had some venison stock on hand.
Okay.
Oh, and it's beautiful. Like it's definitely a game changer for that kind of meat. Like it's getting harder as you get it, like you take deeper dives into the animal to find what to grind, because like that dish, I don't want to grind that flank meat anymore.
Never will again.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I have to force myself to grind, and I really have to be into something.
Yeah. What are you doing with the flank now? I mean, now that we're on that subject,
that was kind of the lead there. Yeah.
Kind of the same deal. I mean, I started off doing just the smaller flank portion, between the egg and the ribs. I actually didn't know. I think it was like Gordon Ramsay or something like 10 years ago. I had some video out about I think it was a lamb flank, and I was like, oh, let me try that with venison, and then it kind of led on to the same thing. Just trying to take the whole side off, but just coming up with different concoctions to roll in there, and whether it be slow cook it first and throw it in the smoker, or do that and then sear it off in the pan to give it more texture, throw it onto the broiler, kind of stuff like that. I did one. It's kind of dumb. I mean, most people aren't going to do this, but I took some fingerling potatoes And I can't remember what else I put in there. It was like a Peruvian inspired dish. So I rolled the fingerling potatoes inside of the flank, tied that off, slow cooked that, and I timed it. I guessed it perfectly. Any other time it wouldn't have came out right. And the really 100% perfect, no grain in there, just tender inside. And then I made like a pan sauce and then put that over top at the end.
Nice.
Is that something that you posted on Instagram, or is that just sort of on something you just did on your own?
It's on there. I can't remember. I think I posted it again not too long ago.
Okay.
I want to say it might have been a video or a post, but if you see it, it'll be like a pan, and it'll just be like a kind of like a hand-sized piece of meat that I've tied up in butcher twine, I think.
That's awesome. We'll have to check that out.
And then also, obviously, right next to the flank, you have the ribs, and the ribs, like, so I've struggled mightily with those ribs. And I've done slow cook and then take it to the grill and kind of finish it off on the grill. But I'm almost, unless if you say something different, Larry, I'm almost to the point where that is just not going to be the same as getting, baby back ribs in the grocery store or whatever, like it's been a struggle. What are you doing with your ribs that might be helpful?
Are you talking specifically venison here?
Venison. Well, I did hog ribs recently, and they were better for sure. It was 5-bar better than venison ribs. And so, yeah, I would say the struggle has been more venison than hog. So if you can think about it from a venison point of view.
Yeah. I mean, I've done a couple of different things. I kind of got the inspiration. You're talking about different inspirations. So like, just looking at it, there's not a lot of meat here. And I was like, what does this remind me of that I've eaten before that I can, because it's never going to be pork ribs. So I'm like, what the hell can this be?
No.
So I came up with the idea. You ever had the Chinese takeout little riblets that have like the little bone in them?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Got that idea and actually made a recipe for those. And you don't get much meat off of them, but that actually turned out pretty good. But you're still going to be hungry at the end. But
it's like a nice appetizer.
Yeah, because the worst is leaving the flank meat on with the ribs. Like you can kind of do that with pork, but venison, it's I don't know. I haven't had success doing that, and so it's been nice to like sort of be able to take that meat off and do something else with it.
Yeah, I mean, which you probably already were, but you can, and you have to time it right, or it'll still get dry. But if you can braise those first in some kind of flavorful broth, and then smoke them or just sear them right after that, I mean, they come out okay, but not crazy. And then I saw a video of like this master butcher, and he did it super fast, but so he filleted off the rib meat and the flank, but as he was going, he was holding the rib meat, and then from the inside he was literally just fast twitch getting the rib meat out. So when he pulled everything, rib meat was attached to every, all the rib meat was attached with the flank and everything, and I thought that was pretty cool. I haven't tried doing that yet though.
I want to think I'm skilled with a knife like that, but I don't know. It seems like
yeah, look it up on YouTube. I mean, he makes it look like he's just cutting a carrot in half. I'm like, go ahead.
I'm gonna have like 3 missing fingers at the end of the season trying to do some of these things.
We have some items in the freezer that would be. I'd love to hear your take on what to do. I'm certainly been looking at recipes, etc., for this, but just off the cuff, like redfish fillets, like what would you do with that?
I mean, something like that, I would just feel obligated to kind of stay like traditional with my area. So it'd probably either be like on the half shell or make your own homemade blackening season. But both are good. But I would say if I want to put in a little bit more effort, the last thing I made with redfish was redfish cakes. And you basically make those like you would a high-end crab cake. So instead of like mixing all the, breadcrumbs in there and just having this dense cake, you kind of form it like a lump crab meat cake with the breadcrumbs on the outside. That's probably been one of my favorite preparations that are out of the box.
Okay, definitely trying that. That sounds really good. We were successful and able to get a sandhill crane last year, and we have the breast meat from them. I'm not sure I don't know if they fly through that region. Have you had experience with a sandhill crane?
Honestly, I didn't didn't even know what they were until about 5 or 6 years ago, and I haven't had the.
So just the breast meat, I think the closest thing to it might be like a geese or goose or whatever. So anything off the top of your head that you would do with that?
Yeah, I mean, as far as just straight normal cookery, I like to do mine just, fast and hot. And then I don't really, I mean, I have brined those and smoked them, and those actually come out phenomenal. But if you want a steak, I mean, mine's just fast, hot, salt and pepper, and then kind of making a pan sauce, on the side. Like I literally treat it like like a nice ribeye.
Some of these cuts are less is more. Like just keep it simple, stupid, right?
Any kind of steak preparation for the most part. Like, I mean, I'll do some kind of marinades, but I mean, if I'm going to go through all that effort, I'd rather turn it into like, goose prosciutto or something.
Right. And then another interesting one that's in the freezer right now too is javelina. And just thinking about just any cut of shoulder, what off the cuff, what would you do with that?
I mean, it depends, if the stinkiness level. So if it's not stinky, like shoulder steaks are a sleeper for pigs, or if it is kind of a smellier animal, there's a few things you could do. I mean, you could still braise, but I would kind of like go for more pungent spices, and try to get more of the fat off, I guess you could say. Another trick you can do, I mean, it's kind of an extra step, but almost like purging the meat. But you could, if you're going to braise it, you could throw it in some stock, kind of bring that up to a simmer, let that simmer for like 30 minutes, pitch that, and then put another batch of stock in there, and then do your cooking. That'll help out quite a bit too.
And then another one, this is probably my favorite on this list, is you'll see cooking or hunting shows, and the caul fat is something you should keep, whether it's hog or venison, but then no one never really says what to do with that afterwards. So what would you do with the caul fat if you had some on hand right now?
Me personally, it's kind of an extra step towards the end, but I would probably just have something I've braised or slow cooked. Because if you'll notice, a lot of my cooking, if I do slow cook something, I like charring it or putting some color on at the end. So you could take like a shank or any other cut of meat, and then once that's tender, let it cool down a little bit, and then wrap that in caul fat. And that'll kind of like, even if it's really tender, it's going to kind of keep it a little bit compact. And then you can either roast that in like a cast iron pan, or throw that on a fine grate grill and kind of get that stuff to start breaking down and get, a little bit crispy. That's probably one of my favorite ways to use caul fat.
Nice. Excellent. Yeah. I think in the past, we wrapped the heart and then we tried to smoke it, but it left like a nice fatty kind of, not glaze, I should say, but just sort of you can tell that layer was there, but seems like, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that seems like a better use.
Yeah, we'll definitely be trying that out. And it's tough too, because when we tried that day, I remember, Matthew, you had made some pork belly bites that was just, it was hard to have anything else in comparison than like fresh wild hog. It was like a sow that was like, it was just the perfect size. I mean, an amazing shot, went down quick, and oh God, that was amazing.
I mean, we literally just butchered the hog, and the pork bellies went, I think I just seasoned them and just took them straight to the smoker just to see, what that would be like, so fresh. And
I know, we were like, let's get back to the fridge and get the rest. Yeah. we had an epic trip that time. I think we were there for like 5 days. We had a total of 10 hunts, and literally had to spend an hour and a half repacking the back of my truck to get home, because every cooler was full. I think we had like 16 animals or something. I mean, we loaded up for this. It's a very target rich environment, and we had every single wild game that's legal to hunt there. We basically had, and it was like the 10th hunt. I remember we went out in the morning and we were like, well, we're here and it's a rut and we got to show up, but I really hope nothing shootable shows up, because we just don't have the room. And after like an hour and a half, like, we did due diligence. Okay, let's go knock some birds down. Like every hunt was successful. And it's one of those times when we came home where we had all these ideas kind of loosely formulated on what we wanted to do with some of them, but we didn't think we'd each be bringing home sandhill cranes. We didn't know if we'd have a javelina, and there was a lot of things like we had to then put our minds to understanding what are we going to do. And I think now we're approaching that a little bit differently when we're out there like, okay, if we get this is what we might do. And I was curious about your mindset when you're going into a hunt, whether it's, deer, hog, geese, turkey. Are you thinking, when I get this, I'm going to prepare it this way, or I'm going to butcher it this way for these meals? Like, do you kind of already have like this blueprint in mind whenever you're seeing this animal on the hoof or, in flight? Like, how do you approach that? And what kind of ideas do you bring to the table when you're hunting?
Usually it's for the specialty cuts that I'm usually kind of having things ramble in my head. Usually it's like the neck or shanks or heart, that's usually what I like will really think about a lot, because I want to like try something new that I haven't tried before. But any of the other cuts, it's usually off the cuff, just kind of like, oh, here, I'm figure out what I'm going to do today. But I do like the neck thing. I've had that, the sous vide neck. I've had that in my head like for a year now. Like I'm going to try that.
Nice.
I've had head cheese in my head for a year now, because it shows up in a lot of cookbooks, and part of the going after the variety of game that George was just mentioning has to do with like you're into the various cookbooks, and there's half the book that you're not using because it's like there's a quail recipe, there's a turkey recipe or whatever, and so or even javelina. Some of these cookbooks have javelina recipes. So part of that being inspired to try to get more game for me personally has been just studying cookbooks, looking in just like what looks good here, like, and that being kind of the start of a process, like you come full circle to cook everything, but the circle really did start with like looking in a book. Oh, that'd be interesting. Let's go out and get that,
Yeah. I mean, even people that have been cooking for 30 years, I mean, you'll definitely still get inspiration from cookbooks. Cause I mean, I do look in cookbooks. Like I never, like, I'm going to make this recipe, but I'll look at something and my brain will just start going all these different directions. I mean, I go to the public library. It's like almost an hour drive, but I go to the library every week and just take out a stack and just kind of flip through them and take them back and go get more. So, I mean, I'm in there a lot. But I just kind of glance at them. So it's really hard to remember like who influenced me, or what, but cause I don't really like study the recipe. It might just be a picture or just the way like a piece of meat was cut.
Right. That makes sense. And, like for the javelina, where I was getting inspired was actually digging through Hank Shaw's website. And what's interesting is he found some Yucatan recipes that really played well with it. And so that, I tried those dishes and then they were phenomenal. And it makes you want to go back and keep digging in, and then all of a sudden you might find that like now I have a couple of Mexico like Mexican chef, not wild game, but just cookbooks that are sitting in my kitchen, and so like one thing's influencing the other, so it's a really cool process, even not being a chef, but just being a cook, to kind of dive into that.
Yeah. I mean, it's the only difference, I don't want to say the only difference, but the only difference between a chef is like the title is, in all honesty, it's like the stuff that doesn't involve cooking. And I know that could piss some other chefs off, but like the title of chef, because I know this is probably going to come up in a different podcast, is the other stuff. You know what I mean? So
and
I don't.
Walk me through that. What does that exactly mean? How are you coming from that?
I mean, with different chefs, it's a touchy subject. Some chefs think if you're not currently in a restaurant, like you shouldn't call yourself a chef. But I mean, there's a fine line. Like I've been around food my entire life. I've always wanted to be a chef. I've earned my stripes. I've ran kitchens. I did all the hard work. Doing paperwork. Managing a huge staff, being at work at 2 a.m, getting up at 6, to go back to work. And then in between that, you still have to be creative and come up with more stuff. I mean, it's tough, man. It's a tough effing job. But it's just something, I feel like I've earned and I'm still passionate about. But I'm not going to call myself still a restaurant chef, but it's like I'm a veteran in the military. You know what I mean? I'm always going to be a veteran. I'm always going to be a chef at heart,
Right.
I feel like, I mean, in my opinion, if you're a recipe creator, if you're creating and putting dishes together, I haven't looked up what chef is in the dictionary, but to me, that feels like something a chef would do, but other than running a restaurant and all that. But I mean, to me, a cook is either cooking from family history or they are looking at the recipes that a chef is creating, and so I think there's a bit that's where I see the line, and that's where you're very inspiring. I mean, like, to look at your Instagram or your website as a hunter who loves to cook. I mean, you've got some very beautiful dishes, and I wish we can go hunting every month so that we can just keep trying your various dishes, So that's a line to me, I don't think you have to own a restaurant.
No, and I mean, it's the first experience I've had with that. So the first fine dining restaurant I went to, and he's an awesome chef. A lot of great chefs have trained under my first fine dining restaurant, and I think he asked me what I wanted to do. And I was like, I want to be a head chef. And then he started going detail, and he just looked at me. I was like, I think I said I can cook or something like that. And, he just looked at me. He's like, what the hell are you talking about? He's like, you don't need to know how to you don't know how to cook to be a chef. And that pissed me off, And then as I dove deeper into it, I mean, he's right, as far on that level, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, anybody can be, you call yourself a home chef, home cook. I don't care. I mean, certain people think a lot about it, but I don't care.
Yeah. When we were kind of talking earlier about kind of the preparation of different types of meats and folks who are starting to become a home cook and really take the next step into preparing the wild game, I was curious about some of your approaches there and your recommendations. I've had some friends that I've brought in that maybe they're familiar with the outdoors, but they hadn't been, a hunter yet or a successful one. And then they really wanted to get into, putting a deer in the freezer. And that's something that's, super common across the country, right? A lot of people, I think that's one of the gateway hunting things. If it's not birds, a lot of folks are getting into deer and, maybe in hogs too now. It's a little more prevalent. But I've had a lot of friends who they'll take their deer and they'll go and take it to the processor, and they'll pick out their sausages or whatever it is they want to have, some steaks and things too. And I'll always tell them, whatever you do, here are the things that you need to keep behind, your back straps, your tenderloins, and kind of I would like for you to walk through the idea. You got a new hunter. They have a cooler full of meat. And what are some of the things that are maybe, not as complex for them to have recipes, and some of the cuts that you should keep? I mean, I think backstrap and tenderloin is one that we can all agree on. It's, you're not taking that to, some grinder for sausage, you're going to bring that back home. But what are some other cuts of meat that you feel like people should be able to hold behind, that that you may have some recipes on your website that you're like, hey, follow this. This is where a good starter block is.
The easiest is anything that you can slow cook, because you don't have to take off the tendons. You don't have to take off the silver skin. Like, all this stuff breaks down. And for the most part, to a certain extent, you don't have to worry about overcooking it. So if you don't know how to cook a steak, it's fine. It's kind of set it and forget it for the most part. And even if you know nothing about cooking, if you can just get down that one technique of using a crock pot, because I mean, there is a little science to it, the timing of it. And even if you don't want to make a homemade sauce, you could find, elevated homemade sauce out there somewhere and add stuff to it. If you find some kind of curry and want to, cook off some onions or whatever else, add that to the sauce and just kind of start there. I mean, you can come up with some phenomenal dishes, even if you don't know, really anything about cooking with those cuts.
And as we're kind of talking about preparation and things like that, Well, we're going to probably be dropping this podcast soon around the September 1st, which is the opening of dove season here in Texas. And Matt and I are going to be hopefully getting out there and getting some dove in a cooler. And let's say we knock these down. I've seen a lot of different recipes where you're pulling out the breast meat, and then I'm starting to see some where they're plucking the whole bird and doing some things with that. Let's say that we've got a dozen dove and we were coming over to your house and we said, Larry, what are you going to do with this? Walk me through like a recipe or an idea or what you do with birds of that kind of size and texture there.
Small birds they can be tricky. I would 110% do like I personally would leave them whole. But like a short brine on there to make sure, you retain some kind of moisture. And then, I've thrown them on the grill and, just kind of gently cook them until they're, just tender. And then I've also had good luck with frying them with a certain type of Asian kind of brine. I can't remember. I came up with this for quail a while back, but so you kind of want the fast and hot deal. So if you, instead of frying with flour or cornmeal, after you brine them, you can use cornstarch or potato starch, because you can literally throw that in there like a 450-degree temp fryer oil. And as long as you don't have sugar in your brine, it's not really going to burn. It's just going to crisp up. So you can kind of do like almost like a flash fry without burning anything and still get some moisture in there. That's kind of how I would do things. Like I've never got into the whole, take the breast meat off and make poppers and all that stuff. Like I'd rather just leave the bird whole.
Yeah. I've been basically doing poppers my whole life because that's what I was introduced to, and like little dove nuggets and things. And
I'm just lazy.
I think like anything adding bacon, it's like anybody who's going to sit down and eat that, and especially in Texas, like jalapenos. That's what I had as a pacifier as a kid. So I grew up with that. Like I'd love hot stuff. And so I'll try not to kill the tongue of all the friends that eat it, but we're always like, let's try this spice out, because we've always just had that around. So that's kind of been a go-to. But as with a lot of wild game, I'm looking to take those next steps, and definitely looking at your website, man. I've been very inspired and in turn very hungry when I look at that. That's a dangerous one to look at, your website with all these amazing dishes. If you're hungry, man, it's like torture. I'm like, I want that right now. So I definitely appreciate that. It's a load of inspiration to get out there. And I know not only are you inspiring on your posts there on your website at the wildgamegourmet.com, but you're also doing some teaching now. Is that correct?
Oh yes, I'm doing like an online master class with outdoor class. It's kind of founded by Go Hunt, so they'll be involved somewhat, but they'll have a culinary side of things. They'll have a hunting side of things. So there'll be me and a few other chefs just going over various recipes and techniques, and then they'll have someone specializing in elk hunting, somebody specializing in mule deer hunting, map reading, so all that kind of stuff.
That's awesome. Do you have a specific focus on what you're kind of going to do yet, or is that kind of in the works? Like as far as the animal that, you're saying everyone has their specialties there.
I've got it all written out. I don't know how much, they want me to release on mine,
right.
But mine's going to be, it's still going to be recipe focused, but I'm kind of what we talked about. It's, to me, cooking is all about techniques. You learn the techniques, you can do whatever you want, there's only a few of them to do it, kind of mainstream cooking. So I want to kind of focus everything more around the technique than the recipe, because once you do that technique, 3 or 4 times, then you're kind of good, like for the most part. So I'm kind of trying to focus on that.
And when you mention those kind of main 3 or 4 techniques, let's say that, we got listeners here that are putting, they're deciding to not just send everything to a processor. What are some techniques and some terms that they may need to become familiar with and read up on to be able to kind of take steps in these recipes?
Braising, and which I know that's kind of a common one, but there's 2 different kinds of braising. So like if you've ever braised before, and like, you always start off with about somewhere between half or 3/4 up the way the meat, sometimes you get back, there's so much moisture and fat, your meat's floating. So instead of braising like that, you could practice braising with the lid cracked. You could cut some parchment paper and kind of put a hole in the top. And then that way, the steam's releasing, but at the same time, it's still kind of, some of it's still catching on the paper and go back in. So you're kind of getting a reduction in the braising, and your meat won't be floating. So you'll come out with a more tender piece of meat in the long run. Something like that. I mean, as far as like sausage making, a lot of people mess up for, keeping their equipment cold, because that'll kind of give you that, not rancid, but it'll be an all fat tasting in your product. And I kind of laughed when I first started. I laughed at that. I was like, oh, you don't need to put all this stuff in the freezer. It's just going to get hot again in like 2 seconds. But it does make a difference. Putting your grinder head in there, your blades, even your bowls, the meat's going in. I mean, that's going to make a huge difference in the final outcome.
We just did that last week.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah, we checked out a Hank Shaw sausage recipe, and I think he's one of the other chefs that is doing the classes, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, he just finished up filming. I think I was actually in Montana while he was there. He finished up maybe like 4 weeks ago.
So these aren't together. They like each person is doing their own individual class then, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's exciting, man. I'm definitely looking forward to checking yours out.
Yeah, it's me. As far as culinary side, I know it's me, Hank. Who was the next one? I don't remember her real name, but I think her handle on Instagram is like Wilderness to Table.
Mm-hmm.
Something around there. And then Jamie Teagan.
Cool.
Yeah, familiar. Yeah, you and Hank Shaw seem to have some similarities, like in terms of sort of doing the internet based exposing people to recipes and things like that, and that's like where I saw you at first. Is I think Instagram does the algorithms where if you're looking at one person and there's similarity, and it'll lead you to the next. And did y'all ever do you get a chance to talk to these people that you're working with, even if it's not just chefs, but some of the other people in the class? Do y'all get together ahead of time and kind of talk about what this is all like, what the whole thing is going to be about,
just over emails and stuff. I mean, as far as the side, I've kind of messaged back and forth with Jamie. I've never talked to Hank. I think, a couple years ago, I maybe like commented on a post or something kind of and talked with him. But yeah, I mean, no, not yet. I mean, it's still at the infant stage. I think there's going to be a lot more to come, in the future. But
there's probably like a premiere too for it, like a kicking off and event and things like that. Is there a date set for when it's
already launched?
Oh, I see. Okay, so it's going to be launched in sequence then.
Yep.
Got it.
Yep. They'll keep releasing folks, and then I want to say they're going to film me before spring as of right now. But yeah, I mean, I would love to get up with, with some of the folks involved in it and get to know them better, which I'm sure I will, after this thing's,
sure.
Full multiple people having their classes,
Well, and whenever that does launch, we'll have you back on too and kind of talk and introduce
Okay, cool.
that, get that going. Then, we were talking about kind of the stuff you've done on the internet and the publicity there. There was one thing I read on your website that I want to read here, and then I got a couple questions on that. You said, wild game is one of those foods that is obviously misunderstood by the people that don't consume it, but it is often misunderstood by the ones who do. For those that eat venison and other wild game, a great number of them usually have some quirky thing that they should be done in order to make the meat more palatable, like soaking larger cuts in some random solution or adding weird starchy binding to the burgers. While there certainly are things that can be done to affect flavor profiles or to alter flavor profiles, such as aging or marinating the meat, it's mainly about mastery cooking and field care techniques. I'd like for you to walk us through some of those things as far as field care techniques and how that transitions into a successful kitchen preparation.
Yeah, I mean, if number one is for me is I tell people, keep it clean, cool, and dry. If you can do those, and that obviously depends on if you're backcountry hunting or if you're truck hunting, whatever. But try to do those, as best as you can. And I could go over ways to do that, but that's like my main three, I guess you could say.
Yeah, let's dive into that a little bit. I mean, I'm kind of thinking about how there's going to be a lot of folks that listen that, they already know these things, but there's a lot of people who I'm hoping to inspire to kind of even become what Matt and I are doing. It's like taking that next step up where we maybe when I first started on, when I was younger, I remember my family's like, we keep the back straps, we take everything else and get it processed. And now I'm like, whoa, my processing bill is way lower every year. There might be some favorites of the family, but I'm looking for the tips that they can really help to bring people into a more of an understanding and having that unity between, being out in the field and bringing it to their plate. So yes, anything you care to share on that is wonderful.
All right. Well, I would say for the vast majority of, deer hunters, they're hunting somewhat close to their truck. And if you're in a state like mine, you can't, even if you're 3 miles deep, you can't break the animal down. Like all you can do is field dress it. So that's number one. Like if you're hunting in a hot season, even in wintertime, man, like if you can gut that thing, get it gutted. And if you're not able to break that thing down, you want to get it home or to the processor ASAP, and then, try to keep the inside clean. But if you are able to break the meat down, and you're kind of close to your truck and you've already got ice or whatnot, like store that meat on top of the ice, and then keep your cooler plugs cracked, and then let the water drain. Because you treat it, as long as you have a decent cooler, you want to treat it like a refrigerator. You don't want that stuff saturating your meat and then turning it different colors and possibly introducing bacteria to your food. That's going to keep it cold and keep it. You can actually bring trash compactor bags if you want to go extra step. You can lay that on top of the ice. Also, if you have the time, you can get that meat off of the bone and then throw it in your cooler. That's probably about the extent for as far as hunting close to your truck. And if you're in the backcountry, getting that kind of in a shade, hopefully there's a breeze going, hung up in the tree, and then getting that tacky, almost pellicle membrane formed on the meat, so you're not getting flies laying eggs on it. If you can do that, and get it boned out if you can. And then another trick, I haven't done this, but it sounds pretty cool, is if you're near a stream, even if it's hot outside, the stream's going to be cooler than a moving stream is going to be cooler than the temperature outside. So throw that into a dry sack, the meat into a dry sack, or a compactor bag, tie that off, and then put that in a running stream and let that water circulate over your bag to cool down the meat. But then you pull it back out because you don't want moisture building up in there, and then hang it up.
Right.
That's can we elaborate on the boning, the deboning that you were talking about? Are you talking about quartering the animal, or literally like on a hind quarter trying to get the bone out?
Yeah. So if I'm backcountry hunting, I'll take the bone out. I personally like leaving them in just so the meat can relax, and you have a better final product if you can hang the meat with the bone in. But yeah, backcountry hunting, man, I try to take the meat, right off the bone and to get it cooled down.
Got it. So for us, and like we're most Texas hunters, you're relatively, private land, and you probably do have access to a hanging cooler or just a cooler itself. And so quartering and getting it on top of ice and not letting it drain over the top. Are there any other types, like when it comes to storing and transporting the meat, is there anything that we should be doing when it goes into the cooler other than just trying to keep on top of the ice?
No, I mean, it's as long as you have adequate amount of ice, and if it's a pretty decent cooler, it can stand being in the sun a little bit. But if it's during the day, I would at least try to get it out of the sun, because that's going to keep the ice from melting. And then if you can, I'll actually freeze gallon jugs of water if you have a pretty big cooler, and then putting those in the bottom of your cooler because, obviously the little cube ice is going to melt 10 times faster than that. That's one way to keep your meat dry and cold and treat it like a true refrigerator. That's probably what I would do if I had the choice.
Yeah, we kind of do that, and we'll actually pre-chill it, the day before, and saving all of our water bottles or whatever it is you have out there, Gatorades, and throwing those out there and putting them in the cooler before we kind of put ice, because we'll kind of have one large container, like one of our, I think it's like the 100 quart that we have, that we'll fill that up with ice on the way into like where we're going to hunt, and then kind of just transfer that into the smaller coolers as we fill those up,
and then pray for the cold front.
Yes, that's the other part. We've kind of like moved our big hunt. We used to be like, all right, opening weekend in Texas, which is usually the 1st of November, and there's times where you're out there and like you're short and t-shirts and you're absolutely sweating, walking around. It's like 95 degrees. It's like, let's move that further into December and hope that, even if it's like cold, sleeting, like rain, you're like, all right, this is better than 95 degrees, and because that changed the dynamic too. Like you're saying, you put an animal on the ground and it's like 100 degrees out, which in Texas, it's like half the year. You kind of got to act quick, and you got to know what you're doing, and you got to have a plan. It's there's a lot of times where I've set like a hog trap, and then, go out the next morning. I'm like, oh, there's 14 in here. This is, time to get to work and, figure out what you got to do, or, calling people up. Who wants a hog? Or 5, It's something that our approach is, you're hoping you're not having too bountiful of a catch in that kind of way too. Cause it's just like way more work. And, it's like getting older, man, tendonitis and stuff. It's like my hands hurt.
Yep. My wife was asking, I built a hog trap out back, my house, and it's only big enough for like 3 hogs. She's like, why'd you build it so small? And I was like, 'cause I don't feel like dealing with all of them.
Dude, yes, we had 17 one time in a 4x4x8 trap, and it was insane. And that also changed the dynamic too, because we also had like a neighbor's calf came in and like was right around the trap, and we're like, okay, wait, if we're, and a suggestion to anybody that runs any kind of hog traps, you never leave anything set unless you're going to be there immediately to check on it, because if you get something that's, a non-target, trap, that you got to have to be there. And anybody who's ever had to free a deer from like a hog trap or something, or seen those, it's something you never want to have to be a part of, and now we decided that to make sure that we didn't, harm any animals other than the hogs that we're trying to eradicate there, is to have like these circle C traps, or like a 6 trap. We'll have hog paneling, and it'll kind of come back around to where we'll like leave the area open and kind of tie it back with like a T-post. And then whenever we're ready to actually set the trap, we'll kind of remove that T-post so the hogs can pinch into that area around the circle. They'll kind of go around the outside, they'll get in, they can't get out. But if a deer comes in, or jumps in, they're jumping out, and they're not getting trapped there. So we've kind of started to move from there. And after we had that 17 in the trap, we're like, no, never again. We got to change our technique.
Yeah, immediately be intimidated. Because I can barely, it's weird around here, man. It's like, nobody ever wants the pigs, it's for here.
Really?
It's, yeah, they'll take the meat if I cook it, or if it's like already like looks perfect at the grocery store. But if I've got a gutted hog, like, hey man, it's yours. And they're like, no, man, I don't have to.
I would think in that region, man, someone would be like, yes, I'm going to throw it on the grill and lap it up some barbecue sauce or something. Not the
pig
case.
picking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not who I know. I mean, you would think so. I thought the same thing.
Well, when we're ever traveling on the East Coast, we'll call you ahead of time. And well, that's after we bring you our dozen doves next week,
All right.
Well, and we'll definitely have you down here at some point in time and hunting some of the ranches here in Texas. We'd love to have you out here and rocking those things out, man. It's always fun to hunt with chefs and stuff too. And it's like, we always have these ideas, but we're looking over at you like, what are you going to do with that one? What are we eating tonight? Well, we did was it a saddle last year that we had never done before. And I was curious if you'd ever done that with the backstrap and the tenderloin on the bone. And we did like a slow cook on that. Have you ever done any of that kind of saddle recipes? Is there something that you might recommend on that?
Nothing crazy, just grilled. I haven't really kind of like thought outside of the box yet on it. Just straight up grilled or roasted in the oven.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good.
It's interesting keeping those two together because at some point they do kind of overlap, you know.
Yeah.
You can cut it thick and kind of see both of them, almost like a half of a porterhouse, I guess.
Yeah,
what that would be. Yeah.
I don't know, it just made me think about it. But yeah, if you see one of my posts, a few people were kind of like, "Why in the hell did you do that?" But I can't remember where I got the idea from. But I did a fried tenderloin, and but yeah, I mean, you still have to fry it so it's like medium rare. But that actually came out really good.
Yeah, that's something that George does quite. I think you do that mostly, right? With the loin and the tenderloins.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of the stuff that I'm cooking, it's based on if I'm going to spend the time in the preparation, I want the most people in my household to be able to enjoy it. And so I found some signature things that I'm like, all right, I can cut up some backstrap and I will pound it out and kind of almost like the way that Matthew did a schnitzel over the winter here, and just kind of like, you know, lightly breading that, you know, and putting some flour or some Japanese breadcrumbs, and then I'll mixing in a bunch of different spices, kind of like your slap your mama type, you know, kind of things that have like a little more bite to them. And that's something that, you know, I can kind of quickly put that in some grapeseed oil or some avocado oil or something that can handle some higher heat, and just, you know, quick hits in there. And my family loves it. And so we've been kind of doing this backstrap medallion Mondays, man. It's like every Monday, it's like my mother-in-law will come over and she's like, "Are we going to do that?" I'm like, "Absolutely. That's your favorite. We're going to rock that out." And the kids eat it too. So it's like, it works all around. My wife loves it. And you know, a lot of those things now are kind of about what they'll like. And now it's like jerky is another thing I've been doing a lot of, just because I also have a lot of meat in our freezer, and it's like, okay, what can I start to kind of do? And, you know, what does everyone like around me? But yeah, that fried, you know, style backstrap, it's wonderful. And I mean, you can, like you said too, you can take something like that too and hit it with some salt and pepper and just, you know, barely kiss it on the pan and, you know, enjoy your steaks. Or, you know, we do a lot of smoking of meats here too. So that's something that we're going to get into. And we have some hog ribs that we're going to try to do some smoking with there too, here pretty soon, and kind of low and slow, and, you know, a 2 cigar, you know, kind of cook as we're sitting out there and having some drinks. But yeah, that's it. You know, those are, you know, it's definitely determined by around who's around. You know, when Matt and I are together, we'll, you know, let's try this raw, you know, heart, you know, let's do this. We're going to try to do your, you know, your poke dish there and, you know, do some of that. But when some other folks who enjoy a little more pedestrian style things, it's like, that's when we alter stuff up. And that kind of, as I was thinking about that, what are some maybe, you know, cuts of meat or some organs or some things that, you know, people aren't, you know, maybe the entry level cooks for wild game aren't pulling aside? What are some of those that you're like, I'm grabbing that? Maybe it's maybe not as traditional, or some organs that some people might not even think twice to pulling out of the gut pile. What are some things there that you kind of are grabbing and gravitating towards?
Minus the heart, because I feel like the heart's an easy one. I mean, probably liver, and if it's a buck, man, believe it or not, the cojones they actually fry up really well. I'm back and forth on. I mean, kidneys are good, but like if you don't cook those things, you know, perfect, I mean, to me, they're not worth it. But yeah, I'll do kidneys every once in a while, but most of the time that way I'm going like into a sausage. But I would say the liver for me is hands down the one. I mean, it's if you either put it in a sausage or don't overcook it, I mean, it really is good. But if you overcook that thing, man, like it's hard to come back from that.
It's done. It's rubber at that point.
Yeah.
So on the testicles, what is the preparation for that? Like, what do you like? Can you walk us through like how to handle the testicles, if you will?
I mean, I just literally, kind of take the membrane off, and I literally treat mine like an oyster. I mean, they are good without being fried, but
Yeah.
Right.
like those are almost meant to be fried. You know what I mean? So I'll kind of
Right.
quarter them or just do thin slices and just fry those up. I mean, I actually haven't put on the blog yet, but I wanted to do a Rocky Mountain oyster po' boy.
Okay.
So it's po' boy with regular oysters, doing it with deer testicles.
So there's an outer membrane, and
Yep.
you have to get past that. And
Yeah, when you get past that, like, you're fine. I mean, you could probably try to cook with it, but I would almost guarantee you that'll explode and burn the crap.
Yeah. No thanks.
I'd actually saved those from last year, but they're still in the freezer. And then it was about a month afterwards, I had another friend tell me that it's like any other organ. They need to kind of be cooked pretty quickly. Is that true, do you think, even with the testicles?
Yeah, I mean, you can get away with it being fried, but if you're gonna like saute it in butter or anything, yeah, it's kind of like a gentle heat, and then just have them where they're kind of barely cooked through.
But how long do you let organ meat kind of hang around, like even in the freezer?
If it's vacuum sealed, like I really don't vacuum seal anything except for organ meat. Just because if I forget about it, I know it's secured and good. I mean, I've got a liver in there still from last season, but usually it's a year for me max. With other meats, I'll keep it longer than that. But if it's back, a year, if it's wrapped in butcher paper and plastic wrap, I mean, probably for me 3 months maybe.
Is that your go-to? And as far as, saving a cut of meat, are you doing plastic wrap and then you're doing butcher paper over it?
I started off doing that, and then I recently wanted to do because I would eat it anyway, even if it was freezer burned, just because I'm not gonna throw it out. But
right.
I tried out half of my processing this year without doing the plastic wrap and just doing an extra roll over with the butcher paper, and none of my stuff got freezer burned. So I'm probably not going back to the plastic wrap. That's one less step and less plastic.
Sure.
So
yeah. Good point.
Definitely trying that. I mean, nothing against Steven Ranella, but on his show, ever since watching it from the beginning, I'd always do plastic and then the butcher paper, especially on the larger cuts. And then once those are broken down, I'll actually move over to the vacuum seal just to, make sure that I could have it for a long time if I wanted to. You definitely just changed everything about organ meat. I didn't realize you could hang on to it that long. Like I've never, I guess I just heard so often that you have to deal with it pretty quickly. And so I've thrown away some stuff thinking that it was not going to be good anymore. Shame on me for not like opening it up and really trying it and giving it a shot. But I'm glad you mentioned that. Like if you vacuum seal and go a year, I mean, maybe those buck testicles will be how we start the hunting season for deer here, George. We might have to break those out and try them.
There we go, man.
Because they're back sealed and they're ready.
I would have kept the testicles for a year.
You wouldn't?
No, I haven't. I mean,
oh, okay.
I'm
We
sure
can be
they're
the
fine.
guinea pigs. We'll let you know.
Yeah, we'll let you know for sure.
I'm sure
What's is there a certain timeline though that I mean, I know I still have 2 hearts in the freezer there too. And we're working on, 9 months or so there as well. And, I've kind of looked at them and they still look great. Is there a timeline? I know you said yours is like a year that you feel for people is like ideal, or is there some that you're like, you should really cook this quicker, or do you kind of treat it all the same as when you get to it within that year mark?
I mean, as far as offal goes, I mean, if it's vac sealed and it's actually good quality plastic that you use, and there's a good seal on it, like a year is good for me. I've never went longer than that. But like I said, if you haven't vac sealed it, I would do a couple months, and then if it's hanging out in your refrigerator, for me, 3 days for me is max. If I don't get to it, it doesn't go. I'm actually make dog food out of it.
Yeah.
It's not going to waste. But as far as like your regular meats, I mean, I've had meat in there for 2 to 3 years, and it's fine.
So have I, and actually, well, I want to say I had a hindquarter that was in the fridge for like 3 years, and it started that sort of dry aging process.
Yeah.
And I did cut a little, like about an 1/8 inch off, and the meat underneath was like, you could literally take a finger and stick your finger through, and it was just bright, beautiful red, and it was some of the best meat I've had from venison. 3 years old, from the freezer. Do you ever do any dry aging with whole hindquarters or any other cuts?
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of for me, I call it caveman style. Like, I'll literally just have hooks, and then I go in there like a hindquarter, and I literally just dry it off in every nook and cranny I can every single day or every other day, and then just keep that dry and make sure there's plenty of air circulation around it. Standard fridge. I mean, your home fridge, as long as you have a regular fridge that's not jam-packed full of stuff, it's fine. And I'll let mine hindquarters, I like 14 to like 21-ish, 28 days. And it's good. It's good. You're not losing too much meat, and it's, the product is really nice.
And what are there specific things that you do with that dry age that you wouldn't necessarily do with other hindquarters?
Kind of for me, it's like kind of the less is more. When I take the time to do that, it's either going to be something that's cured, or it's going to be a steak. Like, for me, it would still make like a good stir fry. I mean, you're going to have a tender piece of meat, but for me, if I go through all that, like, it's going to be specifically for cured or steaks. Because I eat a lot of hindquarter steaks. Most of the time, people think I'm crazy. Like, I cure almost every single one of my back straps, and I still have tenderloins in the freezer. Like, I eat those last.
Yeah, and I'm actually kind of there with you. And I think Joe this earlier too. We have tenderloin still sitting in the freezer as well. But I think that's also just we've become more familiar with the animal. Like, we know what we like. And like I said, one of my favorites is the shank. I love a slow cooked shank. It's hard to find a more rich, velvety texture for like a shredded top meat or something like that. I think I just think that's beautiful. But the excuse me, on that hindquarter, when you get into like the top round and the bottom round and that sirloin cut, like right around the bone, do you look at those differently in terms of what you do with them? Or is it like, okay, these are 3 roast and I can make steaks or braid or whatever, but do you see those individually doing different kinds of recipes and having pluses and minuses about those larger pieces?
Yeah, I mean, even if you don't really, for a home cook, if you don't know even if it is, you know the term, you know what the ball roast is, because that's still going to have some kind of sinew connective tissue like in there. You can roast those still like medium rare. I usually leave those whole. You'll have a little bit of membrane, but it's not bad. You can kind of work all the steaks.
You're talking around the bone, right? Sorry, Larry. You're talking right around the bone, right? Like where it's the one that wraps around the big femur bone?
Yeah, it sits right there.
Okay, cool. I just making sure I understood.
Yeah. So I'll kind of roast those, and all the other ones, I mean, I'll literally either almost, kind of cut them into a steak shape, and I usually leave those whole and just make big steaks out of them. And as long as you cut them across the grain, they're fine. And then you've also got the eye of round. It literally looks like a mini loin or a mini a tenderloin. Those are phenomenal. I usually make sure I'll keep those separate, because for the most part, if you ask me if I wanted that or a tenderloin, I'm taking that.
I'm with you on that, actually, because it's bigger and the I feel like it has like a longer I don't know the right term, but like the longer fiber, if you will.
Yeah, and you get a little bit more bite. I mean, if you're going for ultra buttery, just melt in your mouth, I mean, the tenderloin, but for steaks, lean steaks anyway, like I like a little bit of a bite to it.
I have to give credit to another cookbook, of course, but because again, not creating recipes, but the Meat Eater cookbook will have that. There's a page in there dedicated to just taking a chunk of meat and cooking it to perfection is kind of what they say, right? And so, excuse me, that part that was wrapping around the bone, I think you called it I was calling it a sirloin. What were you calling it? I'm sorry.
It's actually a sirloin, but a lot of the, slang terms are either a football roast or a ball roast.
Right.
I just call it literally, it's like kind of like a ball.
But exactly. It's like, it looks like a football. And that one, you just a ton of salt and pepper and like just kind of cook it to where the inside is whatever you prefer, kind of like 120 myself. And then and you pull that off. I'll let that sit in the fridge for a few days and then I'll thinly slice it, and it sets up like a really beautiful roast beef.
Oh,
like that's probably my favorite muscle right now, but besides the shank, but like that's a really easy go-to, just sort of like get it the right temperature and you're done.
Yeah, I did was it last year? Yeah, I think last year I did a pastrami with it, and it turned out same thing. I did the smoke, everything, let it sit in the refrigerator, and it sliced up, really well.
Nice.
On your smoker, are you running like, is it hot smoke or are you cold smoking, or what's your setup?
Do a mix. I mean, it's funny, man. I've had, offset smokers, direct smokers. I've had a Traeger, and Traeger didn't work out for me. I had a Binger. I got rid of all those, and I've literally, just so I can dial it in, I've just got like a tiny master built smoker that I do all my sausages and everything in. I'll actually cook some whole cuts of meat in there just so I can dial it in. But that's mainly what I'm doing. And then I'll crack the door, put an ice pan in there to cold smoke. Depending on what I'm doing, I've got a handheld smoking gun. So I'll still throw food in there, run a tube through there, and then light the smoking gun up and kind of have that thing just permeate with smoke.
That's a nice technique.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's just like, I imagine it's such a concentration. And then you could probably, you don't necessarily have to have it sitting there longer. Like you can control your timing too, probably better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just have a lot more control. But I coming from North Carolina, I like, direct heat, Texas more of the off, which I love both. Don't get me wrong. They're both phenomenal techniques. But, if I didn't sell my other equipment, I was doing, just whole roasts, I would probably still have like offset or direct smoker for whole cuts.
Do you have a favorite wood that you're smoking with?
Man, it used to be apple for a long time, but probably now, I love pecan. It's probably one of my go-tos.
And is that like where you're thinking, okay, that pairs really well with everything I like, or is pecan for just venison, or you do a different thing for the hogs? And like, what's your take on that?
For me, I'm leaning more towards these days pecan with venison. I feel like you still get the flavor, but it's not like super smoked like hickory. I don't do mesquite too much. Just it has to be like a certain recipe for me to do mesquite. And I'll still kind of mess around with apple, but I'll make up my own blend of the chips. But yeah, most of the time it's pecan for deer, and then I do love hickory for wild game, or no, wild pigs.
Cool. Yep, we've done the same with those. We have my ranch in Central Texas is loaded with mesquite, live oak, and some amazing pecan. And so that we kind of have a bountiful amount to work with. And our place in Southwest Texas, it's mesquite. There's very few other things. It's like, if it doesn't bite you or scratch you, then you're in a different county. I mean, it's all sorts of, mesquite like, brush and stuff. So it's kind of what you have. So it's like, what growing up, that's all. I was like, there's other types of trees people use for this, it's like apples, hickory, wait, it's just not in our vocabulary from what was around us. And then I've had friends kind of get me into, you ought to try this works real well. And I like to do a lot of briskets and like real low smoke, and I'll try different things there just to see how it affects the flavor profile. And I think that's something that Matt and I have done, or Matthew and I have done, and that, obviously, folks like yourself is really experimenting. We're going to try this out. I did a dish the other day that was a smothered pork chop that's in the Field Cookbook, to name drop Jesse Griffiths again. And that was, I did it all with, different cuts of pork. I've tried it with some of the tenderloins, some of the backstrap, and just random cuts just to see how it affects and experiment. And then I decided to use some venison and prepare it the same way, and just to see what happens. And it's kind of a happy little accident. Like, it turned out to be delicious. Really liked it. And I think that's something that I want to, definitely suggest to people who are out here, like listening to this, that maybe are beginning their journey into wild game cooking, and really experiment, try some new things out. You see a sauce that you want to make. Yeah. Try that with this and see if it works out. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. I mean, I'm sure that there's many a times you've kind of had, a happy accident that you've made and that might've turned into one of your favorite dishes. And is there a time like that you've kind of done something maybe off the wall, experimenting, and it's like hit and it's worked for you?
I mean, a ton, man. That's honestly how, even with, this might come across pompous or anything. I learned a ton in culinary school, but man, I learned how to cook from failing. When I was in the Coast Guard, I was independent duty chef on a search and rescue boat. And most, military food is horrible. They got me on the boat and I was running the budget. I could buy whatever I wanted to buy. So I was like, let's just, it can't get any worse. Let's see what happens. So literally every day for 3 years, I would have to make a new menu every week, but I would try new recipes, and some of them didn't turn out good. And some of them, turned out phenomenal. And that's honestly how I learned to cook, was just coming up with random stuff, trying different ideas. Some of it sucked. And then you actually learn the stuff that does suck. You learn how to doctor it up. You figure out, like, if something's too sweet, you can add water, you can add vinegar. Just different things. That's where it comes from, man. Like, you can read all the recipes in the world, but it's going to come from making those recipes and screwing them up and then trying them again and then trying your own thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Good points. I was just thinking about the folks who must have been there on that boat and that day that you're leaving after 2 years. They're probably like, don't go. Must have been some interesting shoes to fill. That next guy, they're like, you better keep this going, man.
Yeah, and I was interesting, man. They were like, oh man, all the good ones always get out, they always leave. So I'm like, gotta do it, man.
That's cool. Do you keep in touch with some of the folks you worked with in that area of your life?
Yeah, actually, my first station, I was stationed down in the Florida Keys. One of the first guys I met ended up being my best friend. He's the best man at my wedding, so I'm still in close contact with him, and then probably a handful of other guys.
Awesome. Speaking of like your close friends and camaraderie, obviously Matthew and I are best of buds, and we're out there cooking and we're preparing and we're throwing ideas back and forth. Do you kind of have some groups of friends or family that you kind of do the hunting with, or is this kind of something that you kind of do on your own?
Man, I'm somewhat of a loner, but man, being out here, I'm almost forced. Like, up the city, and I'm literally off in the cut. Like, I don't really have any neighbors, and I'm literally at my house or hunting by myself 24/7, unless I have some kind of special gig. 100%, yeah. So, but yeah, no, it's me, man, and it's, as far as the inspiration side, that shit's tough, man. Like, just thinking by yourself constantly and not bouncing ideas off somebody, because I do miss that. Like, it's tough. Sure. But yeah.
Well, we'll all get on some text thread here, and we're out there on the ranch. We'll be like, hey, check this out. By the way, what do you suggest?
Yeah.
We'll pick your brain. I don't know how much we got to bring to the table for you, but there's some stuff that we've, like you said, experimenting. You've come up with some amazing dishes that it's just something I definitely implore everybody out there that's getting into wild game hunting is to do what you said too. Try, and if it fail, you're going to learn from your failures sometimes as much as more so than your successes there too.
Yeah, I mean, if I can figure out the legalities of it, I would love to have like a small group of people come out to my property and do like a hog hunt or something and some cooking. I just need to look at the legal side of it, because right now I'm not stepping my feet into that yet until I figure out the legality.
No, I hear you, man. I even on my place, there's been a few incidents that I've heard of from neighbors or things that have come across with ours. And, we have a hold harmless agreement that, everybody who steps on family members, just because you never know how people are going to react if something goes sideways. And, it also kind of keeps people, I think, focused on the letter of the law of whatever it is, that, or, the rules of your own place. Cause, I hear some people that they bring folks out to just kind of hunt at their property. And I'm like, there's so many issues that can come at play. And you really have to be careful who you bring onto your property and the mentality that they're bringing onto your property. I mean, and one thing that just made me think of is that mentality and stuff. Like on our property, we have certain age classes, like for deer, that we are trying to stick with as far as, trying to have like wildlife management. And, okay, we're going to let these bucks get to this particular age, in most situations. Or I don't know, if there's years we're not seeing a lot of javelina, maybe we're not going to take, our 2 each per year that we're allowed in Texas. And, we're constantly gauging things and running game trail cameras and keeping a finger on the pulse of what's on our property. I was kind of curious, is there certain types of that type of mental preparation that you have or on your own property in the surrounding area? Is there kind of a way that you look at that and approach that kind of idea too?
Yeah, I mean, for my property, I'm trying to stick with like a 1 buck rule per season. Kind of right now, the way my property is, like I don't have a huge chunk in comparison to, most people, it's 40 acres, but I've got like 1 or 2 bucks that bet on my property, and I have a huge rut property. If it's the rut and I know it's a deer that haven't been seen on camera, I'll take out 2 max a year. So that's kind of how I am right now. It's like 1 to 2 bucks, 2 max, and then 2 does max, and usually just 1. But yeah, I'm kind of basing it off trail cam picks. Our public land hunting here, it's tough. Baiting's legal here. You can run dogs here. And we do have a ton of deer. You get a ton of tags. So if it's brown for the most part on public, it's down. But I'm not shooting a spike or anything. It's like a 2-year-old or better buck. I'm shooting. But yeah, it's tough hunting out here. So I'm pretty much taking what I can.
Yeah,
I like your idea. I like your idea of bringing people to your property, to educate about hog hunting, and ultimately I have to imagine that leads to butchery and food prep and everything like that. I know there's some programs here in Texas that have had some success doing that. So I have to imagine you can get around or kind of like discovery what legal implications there are. But I think that's a really inspiring thing, because you can bring more non-hunters into the fold and really educate people. And I think that's something that we're seeing more and more across the board, from whether it's like a chef like you or landowners across the country, trying to bring people back to the land and the roots of gardening or hunting, etc. That's inspiring. That's an idea. I hope you find a way to do that, because I think that's really cool, and our country could use more of that. There's too many people who go to the grocery store and can barely identify a cut that they're looking at, let alone even understand that came from a farm.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna try. We got lucky and we brought this property and actually had mobile homes actually in good shape, nice on my property, and I was going to use that. It was for people to stay there. They could basically, that could be their lodging. But we ended up, the market was good here and it was too good to turn down. So we're renting it out full time now. So it's not as appealing, but I'll figure something out. But yeah, I definitely want to make it happen.
That's great, man. I think it'd be awesome. I'd love to check that out. Well, I know we're kind of running on time here, and I just kind of wanted to see if there's anything else that you kind of wanted to share. Like I said, I know there's gonna be people that are gonna be listening to this that are, cooks. There's gonna be chefs. This is the first in our series of introducing the idea of like wild game cooking. And, is there some things that you kind of would like to share with maybe folks who are just kind of starting out? And, then I'd also like for you to, tell everybody, your handles and where they can find you as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you're just starting out, I mean, just don't be intimidated, and don't look, not that I think my accounts, don't look at accounts like mine and think, don't let that intimidate you, because your food has to look like, I mean, it takes time. It takes years. But you can speed that up by taking different classes or whatnot, but just don't let things intimidate you, and just practice, man, and just stick with the basics and try to learn the basic techniques. Your cooking is going to go to focus on that stuff, rather than bouncing all over the place. Just try to hone in your focus on a few techniques, and you're going to grow exponentially. And then I was kind of trying to run another idea of what I could preach to people, and it's, if you get overwhelmed with cookbooks and you just kind of want to do your own thing, find like a Culinary Institute of America, find one of their newer used books from their school for like 30 or 40 books. Man, those books, they don't BS. There's not a chef in there trying to show off some random technique that doesn't work. It's tried and true techniques. And if you're a reader, man, just dive into those and then just kind of let your brain go from there. I mean, they've got charcuterie books, they've got cold preparation books. I mean, just kind of start there if you like to read, and then kind of branch out. You're going to learn everything you need to know in probably 2 of those books.
That's great advice. And speaking of more advice, when people want to learn more about what you've created and what you're doing, where's the best places for them to find you?
Hands down, Instagram. It's Wild Game Gourmet. Like I said, I'm open book. You can message me whenever. I'll answer any of your food questions, hunting questions. It doesn't matter. I'm on Facebook. I'm not really active on Facebook. It's the same thing, Wild Game Gourmet. If you want to shoot me an email, it's larry@wildgamegourmet.com.
Great. Well, unless you have any other questions, Matt?
No, really appreciate your time, Larry. It's been a lot of fun talking to you. I know that for people who are just starting out hunting, and also people like us who are a little bit deeper into understanding these animals, you've been a great resource today to talk to and get more familiar with things that we're trying to do or just beginning to do. So really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Oh yeah, appreciate you having me on.
Good deal. Well, we'll have you back on again. When the master class comes out, and whenever you have any other announcements, definitely want to hear from you again. And thanks again, man. Good luck this hunting season. We'll be getting the text thread going.
Yeah, man. Thanks. You
Take care. Thanks, Larry.
Take care, bud.